Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar presented by SAMHSA's GAIN Center with the support of SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Today's webinar is supporting peers providing services at Intercept Zero, and the presenters are Daryl McGraw and Dr. Karen Fortuna. I am Erica Ihara, and I am a project associate at Policy Research Associates. Before we start our presentations, I have some housekeeping items. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. If you have any questions for the presenters or in relation to the technology, please go ahead and type them into the Q&A pod, which is on the right of your screen, and we will address as many of these questions as time permits. We will also be conducting a couple of polls and really appreciate your participation in these. So when you see a poll pop up on the screen, if you can, we appreciate if you can enter your responses. This webinar is being recorded and slides will be disseminated via the GAINS listserv following the webinar. We will also notify you when the webinar recording is posted to SAMHSA's YouTube channel. And finally, a certificate of attendance will be available for download at the end of the webinar. And please note, this is for personal portfolio use only, and it is not a CEU credit. There is ASL interpretation for this event, and in order to view ASL interpretation, please go to the layout in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. You then select Hide Non-Video Participants and change the layout view to full screen, and then finally select View All. Our interpreters for today are Marika Larson and Dave Gratzer. There's also live captioning for this event, and in order to view live captioning, please select the Accept bottom in the multimedia pod, which is in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And the color contrast of the caption pod can be changed as needed. We do recommend high contrast style for best visibility. So next, I would like to introduce the agenda for today. After I complete the housekeeping and introductions, I will be turning this over to Daryl McGraw and Dr. Karen Fortuna to present, and then we'll have some time at the end to answer questions from the audience. So now I would like to introduce our two speakers. First, Daryl McGraw, who is CEO of Formerly Inc., which is Connecticut's first criminal justice reentry reform consultant agency, and it is predominantly staffed by formerly incarcerated individuals. He is a community activist and a philanthropist with expertise in reentry and criminal justice reform, as well as behavioral health and addiction services. Daryl has state certifications as an addictions counselor, a recovery support specialist, and criminal justice professional. Dr. Karen Fortuna, who is Assistant Professor of Psychiatry at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth College. She works with peer support specialists to co-produce and empirically test digital peer support technologies and trainings. She serves on the American Psychiatric Association's expert advisory panel on smartphone app development, as well as on the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute's advisory panel on patient engagement. She also serves on the editorial board at the Journal of Participatory Medicine. So I'd like to just report on some observations about who is calling into this webinar today. The majority of you who have entered your responses to the poll are calling in from urban locations, followed by rural locations, and finally suburban locations. And our professional affiliations are primarily people calling in from crisis service providers, community-based organizations, and those are the two main categories. A couple of you also filled in other. So we'd like to welcome you all today and thank you again for joining us. And now I will turn it over to Daryl McGraw to begin the presentation. Daryl?
Oh, thank you so much. And hello, everyone. My name is Darryl McGraw, and I'm excited to be here. It's a little different style for me because I'm used to seeing everybody, but this new world of Zoom, and we're going to be talking about today leveraging critical skills. That's Intercept Zero. One of the things I just want to add before I start my presentation, I'm also a person in long-time recovery, which means I haven't used a substance since May 7th, 2007. I'm also a survivor of PTSD, urban trauma, as well as trauma from incarceration. So I like to say that because even though when I do my presentations, I like to know that I'm presenting from a lived experience perspective as well. So thank you, and I enjoy and looking forward to the conversation at the end. So I live in Connecticut, and COVID has definitely set us all for taught us a new way to live, and some of the things that I'm a criminal justice advocate, criminal justice reform advocate, and activist. So when we start looking at the data when COVID happened, that's March 2020, right? And through June 1st, 2020, we started to see almost 2,000 people released from prison. A lot of advocacy work, getting people out due to COVID. And so what I've been advocating for forever happened due to COVID, right? Decarceration, So I'm a big fan of getting people out and keeping them out. And that's what we're going to talk about. But we're also going to talk about, because we're talking about from Intercept Zero, actual individuals not even entering the criminal justice system. One of the things that I do in my work with Formerly Inc. is training forensic peer support workers. And these are individuals that work with justice-involved people. So individuals that are coming out of the correctional system, that may be in pretrial status, maybe on probation, like anybody that has criminal justice involvement. I train individuals how to work with them, because those of you that are justice involved are familiar with the criminal justice system, myself included. One of the most difficult things I had to deal with was with the reentering back into community. It can be overwhelming, but just having any criminal justice involvement can be overwhelming. And so, as the slide says, we live, it's a new world today. And forensic peer workers need to lead by example. What do I mean by that? I mean that, since that, they're individuals are justice involved, so we're making sure that I'm training people to work with this population, but being that things have changed where you got to wear masks, make sure your hands are clean, and all different types of preventative measures so people don't get sick. We train forensic peer workers to lead by examples in many different ways, not only in the community, but as times have changed with COVID, we ask them to also, role model mask wearing and being safe, and so on and so forth, because it's very important that safety and self-care is important. As you see, over 7 million people are currently involved in the criminal justice system through incarceration, parole, probation, community corrections. 1 in 3 adults has a criminal record. And one of the things that when I'm doing a talk, I always point out, you get a lot of different opinions about the criminal justice system and the services that we provide, even at Intercept Zero before going in, or people getting out, what have you. 95% of the people that are in prison are going to be released. And I always say that we may not be responsible for how an individual goes into prison, but we should be concerned how they come home. And I'm a big component down that we've in Connecticut, what I wanted to point out is that when I went to prison, there was 20,000 people in prison. Now Connecticut is down to 9,000. So we're under 10,000. We're under 10,000. So we have cut our criminal, the unfortunate blessing of COVID, we have actually cut our population in half. So now I'm looking at how do we, and many of you that are on this call, many states have done the same, how do we keep those individuals out? How do we support them while they're out? Because the interesting thing is that the mass release of individuals with that they have had, we show that here there are 356,000 people with mental illnesses in prison, and that was a slide from an older slide, but the numbers are still high. And those of you that work in the field and work with this population know that some of the data shows that maybe 90% have mental illness or substance use or both co-occurring disorders, right? And 85% of the 2.3 million inmates in jails and prisons are substance involved, right? So the interesting thing, and this is what I wanted to point out, is that with COVID and the decarceration, people not going in prison or getting out of prison early, some of you that know, or work with this population, or that are my people that are in recovery, right, know that some people use jail as a form of rehabilitation, rehab, right? So they go in and they, get their weight up and they stop, they're not using, and they're, they are, they take that time to heal themselves, to get back to that time that they're in. Well, when COVID happened, people weren't going to jail, or they were getting out of jail. They got out before they had mended those fences, or, with their families, and they were released before they expected to. So those bridges weren't repaired, and so people weren't prepared to come back out. And so now they went in thinking that they were going to be there for a while, and now they're out. So as forensic peer support staff, we are here we need to be there to support those individuals in those situations as well, and individuals that are in court and that are on probation and that are any forms of justice involvement. How do we support those people in the community? So the forensic peer support specialist, the navigation through the reentry process. We're just going to talk about the reentry process. I know that we're going to really focus today, and when you hear my colleague Karen talk, and on this particular webinar, we're talking about Intercept Zero, but it's important for me to always talk about the navigation through the reentry process, because this is all inclusive. So you guys are getting a little extra today, right? So the navigation through the reentry process, the criminal justice system finding community supports. This is where that forensic peer, and if you're not familiar with it, reach out, make sure you throw it in the chat box. You ask me more about that forensic peer training, because this is something that we can't just glaze over. It's super important that we make sure that peer workers who are working, especially in the midst of COVID, are skilled in this skill set to be able to engage these individuals that are justice involved. And that comes with finding community supports and being knowledgeable about community source, where the food's at, where these services are at, and especially in the midst of COVID when things are closed now. We got to make sure that we are, these individuals that that are trained forensic peer support specialists have this knowledge, increased accountability. Those are individuals that have ourselves been justice involved. So we may have, we have a criminal record, but we have this accountability to be role models, upstanding citizens, because we want people to know that, change is possible. Change is possible. I spent 10 years of my life in and out of the correctional system. And today, now I run my own organization. I've worked at state level. I'm sitting on numerous different boards and so on and so forth. But my main goal, I had two main goals getting out of incarceration. One was to not use substances anymore, and the other was to stay free. And now that I have found my path, it's my duty to help others get out. I like to call it our modern day Underground Railroad. So role modeling for peers who, similar to what I was just saying, role modeling for peers who have successfully completed their criminal justice obligations. So there are many of us, 62 million Americans have has a criminal record. So many of us, and I know there's some of my people on the call. I know there's some of you out there that are listening to this. You have successfully transitioned back into the forensic world, and you've successfully transitioned back into the community, and Now you want to give back. That's one of the number one things we want to give back. So what we do is we help individuals train, and we train individuals to work with this population. And through that training, you learn how to advocate for clients, advocate for clients. Sometimes a client may not have the ability or the skill set to articulate certain needs. So sometimes that may come through in the way of role modeling or just talking it through and saying, hey, you know what, I've been there. This is how I would handle it, and so on and so forth. But one of the important things, and it's not on the slide, but I want to make sure that I mention it, when individuals are justice involved, and at Intercept Zero, they may still be going to court. We make sure that a well-trained forensic peer support specialist knows that they're not a lawyer. So we do not give legal advice. Our goal is to support through the process, whatever that may look like. So, and then also supporting people with life skills that they may be lacking. And these are just some of the gifts that we give, that forensic peer supports we offer, is the ability to instill hope, modeling one's example of recovery, mentoring, the engagement, street smarts, one of my favorites, because you have to be savvy. You may have moved on. What I like to say is we've turned the criminogenic thinking into a tool that we can no longer use criminogenic thinking, but use our street smarts to help others transition and be successful in the community, get out, stay out, and not worry about going back into prison. And education. Education for me is key. Education was the key for me, and it was a big component of my recovery story. And once again, we lift as we climb, right? So even though that I have removed myself from the criminal world, I am still in here reaching back in for my brothers and sisters and pulling them out and trying to show them the way. A lot of appropriate settings for, I believe we should be everywhere. I'm just going to say that. I'm just going to say we should be everywhere. Forensic peer support specialists should be everywhere, but in traditional courts, halfway houses, juvenile detention, jail detention, mental health centers, emergency rooms. You do see emergency coaches. I actually was on a call today with someone who has over 20 emergency room coaches, and they were looking into this forensic peer support training. So the forensic peers is a specialty, right? So someone's a doctor, right? But you want to be a brain surgeon or you're a special, so the forensic peer is the added. So what we look to train is individuals who may have recovery coaching or peer support training, and then we add the forensic. That's the specialty to it, my favorite part. In churches, agencies, there's no place that we shouldn't have specially trained peers. And, so as I said, certified recovery coaches, peer recovery coaches. This is a qualification, and every state is a little different. But as anybody knows, we have challenges once we get out. I think people should be settled, stable in their recovery. But we like to see, in Connecticut, we like to see 2 years of substance-free use, no use. Now, that does not exclude MAT if a person is using medicated assisted treatment. That works too, but 2 years of not using mind-altering mood substances. Minimum of 6 months of volunteer experience working with individuals in the criminal justice system, successful completion of the criminal justice system requirements. And that's if when they're timing, if you're working with individuals who are justice involved, you some of the criteria is you want to be off of any type of supervision so you can work successfully with these individuals, because if you yourself have some type of supervision, it may be difficult to fulfill the role. Not currently on parole or an ability to tell a story of success in a meaningful way. So what does that mean? Like using that story as a tool. Like it's not an NA meeting when you engage everybody and you don't go through that, but when I tell my story, or if I'm telling pieces of my story, I make sure that we tell it at a certain we tell the story, the engagement piece when we're engaging individuals we make sure that we tell the story in a successful way. I think I can only see a few things, and I think someone said looks like Intercept 4. Here's the intercepts. What I want to make sure is that you understand how forensic peer support works. So it can work technically through all the intercepts, from intercept 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Today we'll talk about 0, when you're actually engaging people on the outside before they even enter the system, before individuals that may be in the pretrial status may just be interacting with law enforcement, where we're connecting with police officers, and we have police officers that may say to me, hey, Darryl, I got this guy. I don't really want to lock him up. He's not, but, a lot of times police officers or prosecutors will say to me, I only have one recourse. It's either lock them up or let them go, and I don't feel comfortable letting them go without supports. So this is where your forensic peer support staff comes in really strongly at Intercept 0, as when you can actually meet with them in the community and try to help those individuals be successful in the community before Intercept 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 becomes a reality in their life. So one of the things that, due to COVID, we've been understanding that the new normal, right? So a lot of this, just like we're doing today, is, interacting with people through digital peer support, or even some of the trainings. I've done several trainings now with different states where we've done the forensic peer support training over Zoom because of COVID. Which is an interesting thing, is the fact that the challenge may be that some individuals, when you're talking about providing peer support for them, they may not have the resources, they may not have internet, they may not have a computer. A lot of times I'm engaging guys on their cell phones. And then the other challenge is that this forensic peer support may have to engage this person once or twice in the community to show them. I know I was working with a guy who just did 14 years yesterday, and he wanted to do some spoken word at a conference, and he was hired to do spoken word, but he had just did 14 years in a federal institution. So he's out now, and he's trying to figure out how to navigate this new world. And he was like, I don't know how to access my email. I don't know how to use Zoom. I don't know how to do this. So we need to make sure when we're working with individuals out here, we're meeting them where they're at, and we're actually showing these individuals, how to utilize and how to engage and use this new technology using their cell phones, whether it be it text, Zooms, FaceTiming, or whatever is comfortable for the individual, and meeting them where they're at and understanding this was an older individual, and he felt really challenged that he could not engage at that level, and he was just so apologetic. He's like, man, I've been locked up a long time. I'm just trying to figure it out. And you know what? As a forensic peer supporter of this individual, we just say, don't worry about it. We're going to be there for you. And just, and teaching people and kind of, working with individuals and at Intercept 0 when we can't engage with them physically, and just using whatever technology, whatever place a person feels comfortable. I have people that call me through Facebook Messenger because they don't have phones. They're using text, or they're doing this. And sometimes when I'm working with young people who are in the system that are justice involved and not arrested yet, but we find out that they're doing things on Facebook and on different media platforms, that's another form of engagement in talking to them, because a lot of times police do their find out cases and things through their social media, and then it is the role of the forensic peer support person to kind of like educate them on what are you doing. You're putting this out there for the world to see. Just common barriers for those that are justice involved, right? So and when they say justice involved, that is an individual that may not have never been in prison. Maybe they have always been at Intercept 0, but they still have the criminal record, and they still have these problems: transportation, employment. I talked to a guy yesterday, and he was a former attorney, and he was telling me that he's still with the criminal record, he has these barriers, right? And he had the education. These are issues here. And I was just talking about the gentleman yesterday, the lack of the knowledge of using technology, or those family issues. Individual ones doesn't want to go to prison. They don't want to go to jail. They're just as involved because of maybe their family environment. So therefore offering forensic peer support to say that, trying to support that person in the community as best as we can. And, just reiterating the fact that a lot of this support may come through, which would normally be in person, may now be through electronic devices, whether it be Zoom, or if that individual has a phone. We have to figure out how to make sure that everyone's safe using technology and teaching people. So I just want to make sure that we're focusing on that. I know my colleague is going to get really deep into that. And just under normal circumstances, we would just be under normal circumstances, pre-COVID, we would make contact with individuals, provide services in the community, and offer services in the individual's home. We don't, right now, that's not something that's happening. Sometimes, in rare cases where people don't have technology, we're meeting people in the community with masks on, usually outside, but not in their home. And also showing individuals, like another thing that's a challenge is those that are accepting applications, many of those applications and uploading resumes or what have you, everything is pretty much done online. So those justice involved people really struggle. Our people that are justice involved at Intercept Zero that are struggling and finding themselves having interactions with law enforcement, finding themselves in court settings and AICs and all these other situations, probation, what have you, not incarcerated, but still struggling with just trying to adjust in the community. Some of the skills that we would help them with is anger management, budgeting, renting, filling out applications, like I said, using technologies, being a good friend, father and mother. So, these are things that, these are things that lead people into situations that may cause criminal justice involvement because of the struggling with all these issues. We try to support those individuals there. And figuring out the public transportation system. I know I struggle with that myself, and I've been home almost over 10 years now, and grocery shopping. And we've been able to do some really cool cooking shows online, right? Doing cooking shows and some of this, like helping people showing people how to set up utilities online, which is one of the things. Is many of these things can be done. A lot of these things can be done virtually now. And getting one of the cool things is helping people get library cards, which is a little difficult now, but making appointments and getting medication filled right now in the midst of COVID, trying to get people to learn, trying to show individuals and talk them through actually getting registered for vaccines online has been one of the challenges, one of the most significant challenges lately. And just go through this really quickly, just, some of the, these are just common barriers that individuals face, justice involved, and name any intercept. These are still some of the challenges, as we mentioned earlier, no transportation, lack of stable housing, hunger, everybody's struggling now to have food and all these different things, and mental health challenges. And how are we engaging these individuals that are used to receiving, just walking into the place to receive support? So now we have to teach them a different way of accessing support for themselves. And just a relationship, relational safety, as peers, forensic peers, we definitely, regardless of how we engage with these individuals, we're striving for the connection. The connection is key. One of the things that we pride ourselves on, especially as peers, is treating people as humans. When the system has given up on them, we have not. And having that ability through that training, we learn how to notice disconnect and talk about what the needs are, what the need to do to reestablish connection. and both people matter. It's not just a one-sided thing. I'm not better than you because I'm a peer. I work for this organization. I got a badge. It's not that. It's I'm here to help you. I am a support system for you. And just, these are common disconnects. This is common disconnects. Yeah, Brett's asking about those slides. Brett's wanting to know if we're going to get the slides. We'll make sure you get them. I see the chat popping up. And just those common disconnects, ordering, directing, arguing, lecturing, telling people what to do. A lot of people are, adults. This is a program of suggestion. We work with people. We don't, tell them what to do. Well, we're not a parent. We're a peer support person, and being unaware of your power. So this comes through training. And another common disconnect is over relating. Like oh yeah, I get it. Oh, that happened to me, or questioning and probing. I know this is a trigger for me. Whether even in employment settings, and a lot of times employers miss this. People that tend to be justice involved. When you're over questioning, it almost feels like an interrogation and can be triggering. So making sure that you're staying focused on the issues of working with the individual, changing the subject when it's difficult, and this is challenging when we're talking through text. A lot of things get misconstrued through text, and steering the conversation and pushing your own agenda. It's always about me. And really, we try to be more person-centered. As a forensic peer support staff person, you want to make sure that it's more about the individual and less about you. Yes, your story is important, but we use it as a tool, not, it's not, like I said, once again, it's not a meeting. And reacting and responding, just quick reactions, instead of taking your time. This is a difficult time for everybody, and everyone's struggling. So we got to make sure how we respond and how we react are important, that we're keeping ourselves in line, even though it's a struggle for both parties. But when you're working with individuals in the community, especially at Intercept Zero, who may be in the pretrial phase and struggling about worrying if they're going to end up in prison, thinking about the things, feeling remorseful or guilty about the action that got them arrested. So you want to make sure that your reactions are not aggressive, that you're working, because think about it, that person needs you to be supportive for them. So your responses need to be different than everyone else, because the police and family members and everyone, that person may be going through a lot. So we want to make sure our responses are proper. And before you respond, you should always, and this is for individuals that work directly. And even if you're not a forensic peer support person, you get these slides and you really look at it and think about the relationship and how you want to interact with individuals. In this time, we want to make sure people have space, of course. We're dealing with people in compassion. I'm always monitoring, making sure my tone is correct. Let it go instead of holding on and cherishing and personalizing, and we talk about that. And then sometimes we're all human, right? We're human. So, of course, if you make a mistake, apologize. When you do fall victim to that, I'll make sure you apologize. Apologize, own your part. I know when I'm talking to my kids and they're having a disagreement, or I'm working with other people that are in the community who work with justice-involved people, because there's a lot of disconnect at Intercept Zero. There's a lot, because there's a lot of struggles going on, and a lot of challenges at that space. It's not like a person who was in prison and had some time to think about it. This is happening right now, right? Their situation is current. It's not like, oh, I had some time to think about it, I did some time. No, this is happening right now. So we want to definitely be as supportive as we can when we're working with those individuals. So once again, apologize, own your part. I always tell my kids, what was your nickel in that dime? Ask if you said something that bothered them, because that disconnect, either over phone, Zoom, in person, 6 feet deep, you can feel that disconnect happen, and you can see it. And it's more about connection than disconnection. and expressing empathy. We're seeing a lot of this, when people have their own struggles right now, in the midst of COVID, individuals that, that do this work have sometimes, I know I'm talking to a lot of friends who have lost touch with their own feelings. So it's going to be difficult to be able to support someone else if you're struggling. And I always say you got to check in with yourself before you can actually go out there and do this work. Situations or problem might be similar or too close to your own. Like, a lot of times, someone loses someone, this person, that might be a little too close for comfort, as we say. So you want to make sure you're checking in with your network. I always say my network is my net worth. Your supervisor, whoever's your support system, because we should have support systems too. You can't be a support system without having your own support system. And if peers believe the person's background or crime is horrendous, empathetic response may become blocked. A lot of times people who do this work, when you're working with justice-involved people and you meet them at the courthouse or you meet them at AIC, you meet them in the community, and you find out what they did, there might be some bias or something that you may struggle with. So, and always the lack of self-care. If I'm not taking care of myself, there's no way that I can help anyone be a good forensic peer support staff person to those individuals. And all this is discussed through the training. When I'm doing trainings, you want to make sure if you and your staff are getting trained, you want to make sure you're getting trained by somebody that makes sure that we cover all these bases. And just staying connected, how to stay connected, if the individual is in recovery, we're working with them. And another disconnect that we don't talk about is a lot of times a person may be in recovery, they may have worked on themselves, but at Intercept 0, this person may be not ready for recovery. This person may not be there. These individuals might have already worked on themselves, so you got to be able to check that. And, just, encouraging, for the individual working with those, and try to get these people to focus on doing things different, doing life a little bit different, and encourage them to, themselves, to, spend time with those people that they loved and doing something fun. I mean, today in Connecticut, it's about 50 degrees outside, which is a first. So, I mean, it's been cold. So getting outside, getting some sun on your face because we've been trapped in the house, and just, being in a moment. And this is for both. I say it for, more focus towards the individuals that are doing the work, but also this is like, it's a mutuality. So we also offer it to the people that we work with, like, not taking your work home and being there for your family and trying to figure out how to balance work life, trying to figure out how to balance the situation that you may be in, and always practicing mindfulness. And, this may be a struggle, but it's more important for our forensic peer support staff to embrace these staying connected tips because this work can be difficult. I tried to get it all in really quickly. If I spoke too fast, I apologize. It's kind of difficult working through this stage, but I'm going to introduce my colleague Karen Fortuna, who's going to take you through the next part of it. If you have any questions for me, I'll see you at the end. Karen, how you doing?
Hey, Beryl, how you doing? That was great.
Oh, man, got through it.
I always learn so much from you, and always happy to co-present with you. So this is very exciting.
Thank you so much.
I hear you. So welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for having me here. I'm an assistant professor of psychiatry at Dartmouth College, and my background is in social welfare. And so it's quite interesting in working within a school of medicine and bringing forth the social determinants of health, and working with peer support specialists now across the world in developing, designing, testing digital peer support technologies. And this is one of the ways that individuals can connect with one another outside of a traditional type of environment. So we're going to take a deep dive into some of the technologies that are available for individuals to support one another at Intercept 0. So this is exciting. So if you don't mind, just going to the next slide, please. And I do have some disclosures for individuals, and one of which is some consulting work I do with social wellness, also Trust app, and also Inquisit Health as well. So next slide, please. We do have some very exciting grants from the National Institutes of Mental Health, and I'm also working with NARSAT, or the Brain and Behavior Foundation, on a Young Investigator grant for the work we've been doing in PeerTech, which is a smartphone application that we have developed with peer support specialists as partners. Next slide, please. So just briefly, and for our facilitators, I'm going to speak until 3:30 if that works okay with folks, and if not, just let me know if we need to shorten a little bit. For the agenda for today, I'm going to talk about, well, what is digital peer support? I'm also going to speak to some of the competencies in peer support. And so if you were a forensic peer support specialist or an individual who's just as involved, what are some of the competencies that individuals should have to advance their work? Then I'll speak to the digital peer support training. And then also what is really fascinating is that more and more peer support specialists, including forensic peer support specialists, are actually developing technologies. And so we're going to speak to how to develop some technologies to promote health equity and equal access for individuals. So next slide, please. So really, what is digital peer support? And so this is defined within the scientific literature as live or automated peer support services delivered through a technology media. So here you see the history of digital peer support. And no, this is within the scientific literature. There's actually a lot more out there that hasn't been published on in peer-reviewed journals. And by a peer-reviewed journal, I mean that the journal is reviewed by multiple scientists to ensure that it meets scientific standards. And so here we see digital peer support expanding across the globe, starting in 2005 all the way to 2020, which is when COVID has embarked on our world. And so then we have this rapid use of digital peer support. And what is so interesting about this is that, as Gerald was talking about, maybe it's a telephone call, maybe it's a text message, and maybe it's video games, maybe it's a smartphone app, maybe it's actually virtual reality. One of the great things about digital peer support is that it could be delivered through any type of technology medium, and it's really about connecting with the other person on the other end of that, and vice versa. So it's supporting people in the community, and that technology is just the medium to actually do that. So what do we know? Next slide, please. What do we know about digital peer support? And so this is quite fascinating. I'm going to talk about some unpublished research that will be coming out very soon. And so just a little bit about the landscape, about what that looks like, and I'll talk about what we know about that. And so with a survey we did with 463 peer support specialists, we asked them, and this was during COVID, what types of technologies are you using to support other people in the community? And we saw, go out in that chat and let us know what you think some of the technologies individuals are using, and I'll walk us through what we were seeing. So we saw that almost about 42% of folks were using telephone calls, so warm lines or checking in on people. And 35% of individuals reported using video conferencing to connect with other individuals. And this is really neat. 28% of individuals were offering text message peer support. And that's really exciting because you can offer this at any time, any place. It could be, if it's okay to text message the person late at night, you can text message when people are in need of support services. And we know from the scientific literature that text messaging between peer support specialists and service users promotes health behavior change, promotes recovery, and social support for folks. And so that's really exciting. and 16% of people are using smartphone applications. 13% are using social media like Facebook to offer support services. And these are some other emerging areas. We're seeing about 3% offering peer support through virtual reality. That's those headsets that people put on and they go into these virtual worlds. And about 2% are offering peer support services through video games. And so within that, people are joining and playing a video game at a certain time with their friends. And as they're playing the game, they're actually offering people support services. And so what do we know about this? Well, there's no geographical or time limitations. Individuals could access some of these, we'll say, social media at any time, any date, it doesn't matter. And if you're offering Medicaid reimbursable services, you can offer services within your respective state. And so if you're in a city within your state, you can actually offer peer support services in rural areas. And those folks usually don't have a lot of services and have a lot of access challenges. And so it's exciting that we can reach people in these specific areas. We also know, too, that digital peer support engages people outside of a clinical environment. And so we know that mental health challenges or substance use challenges that is a really high prevalence among individuals who are justice involved or at Intercept Zero, that people need support outside of traditional 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. These challenges that individuals have, they don't happen at a scheduled time, Thursday at 3 o'clock. No, no, no. It could happen on a Saturday at 4 a.m. And so what's really great is that we can engage people outside of these clinical environments. Also, we can expand the reach of peer support services. And so if Daryl is offering even training to individuals in person, maybe it's 10 people per month, and I'm just making this up, so Daryl has to correct me if I am correct or completely off. Now Daryl potentially using technology could train more people, maybe have 30 people in one meeting using different types of technology. Or if you're offering support services using technology, maybe we take out the transportation, we take out the transportation for folks that people could meet one-on-one. Just know too that even though we can increase the reach of these peer support services, also we're hearing is leading to digital fatigue. If anyone has heard of that, go ahead and put that in the chat. Let us know if you've heard what digital fatigue is and if it's impacting you yourself. So it's happening. People are going from meeting to meeting to meeting and offering support services through different technology features. And there's not enough time for people to recoup or to have self-care. And so while we expand the reach of these services, we also have to be very aware that it could also impact retention on the job. Also, we can increase the impact of your support services without additional in-person sessions. And so when people need extra support, what Daryl was talking about, getting people, helping people get to the grocery store, help people with housing, help people find a job, you can actually increase the impact of your support services using technology. So what that means is text messaging in between sessions, following up with phone calls in between sessions, having a social media group for people to support one another. And you're actually increasing your impact by doing that, which is quite amazing, at least according to the scientific literature, beginning to see that. And then you can access hard-to-reach groups like individuals in rural areas, which I spoke to before, and also homebound older adults. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So, sorry, I tell you all about this. Well, is it effective? Does it actually do anything? Well, what we're seeing within the scientific literature is that digital peer support is effective. And know that this is a new area of scientific research. So we're reporting on what we know about it from smaller studies, not large studies with a big population and advanced methodology. And so we're seeing early evidence that it is effective in enhancing hope, quality of life, empowerment, social support, and recovery. It's enhancing functioning or living in a community. It's helping people reduce mental health symptoms. And it's improving engagement in services. And this is around mental health. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see we have, there's some research done on substance use challenges as well. So again, really early area of research. However, we're seeing promising evidence that is either showing reductions in risky substance use, high levels of satisfaction and perceived benefit, and it's also promoting engagement in services. If you don't go to, I'm going to the next slide, the digital peer support competencies. So this is exciting, and this is actually a really new area that is currently unpublished, but we are publishing this within the scientific literature. We have collaborated with 40 peer support specialists across the globe, and we asked them, what types of things do you need to know and be really capable in to offer digital peer support services? And within that group included forensic peer support specialists as well, and together out of 40 people we came to a consensus about what are these competencies that we need to know. And one on the left-hand side here is that affordability and access. We need to know how to get people technology that is affordable for individuals, and see if there's, and provide people services so they can have access to technologies to connect with one another. And so that's increasing the access. If you go down, we see the digital communication skills. This is really important. This is, you know, how do you send a text message to an individual? What time should you send the text message? And how do you portray yourself through these certain types of technologies? Next, we have separating work and personal life, which has been very challenging because many people are still working in their homes and offering these digital peer support services. And so how do you separate this work and personal life? And even if you're offering in-person support services in combination with some digital, like telephone calls or text messaging, how do you make sure that you're respecting your own boundaries and also the boundaries of the service user that you're working with as well? And then up here on the right-hand side is beliefs and preferences. This is incredibly important, and Daryl was speaking to older adults and technology use, which is really a whole group of individuals aged 65 years or older who may or may not have been justice involved or at Intercept Zero, who are engaging in technology potentially for the first time ever. We know that about 88% of people with a lived experience of a mental health challenge access and use smartphone applications. We know among peer support specialists, it's about 95%. And we know that those rates are a little bit lower among older adults, more around 65% for older adults. And so when we want to promote engagement in services, especially for certain populations, such as older adults or individuals in rural areas, we have to consider their beliefs and preferences in technology. And so if someone is an older adult, maybe they haven't used technology before, literally the first time ever, and if you're offering digital peer support services, offering services through virtual reality may not be the most appropriate way, considering that the older adult's preference is through the telephone. Another way to look at this too, what if you're offering text message support and an older adult is using a smartphone, yet as individuals age, there's normal age-related changes that could change our dexterity, meaning actually being able to type on a smartphone. That may not be the best way to connect with individuals and could lead to disengagement. And so just some things to think about the importance of preference. And then technology literacy. So this is, you know, what are all these new technologies coming out there, including natural language processing, digital phenotyping, machine learning, all like what the heck is all this stuff? We're learning more and more that peer support specialists are becoming social entrepreneurs and engaging in developing their own organizations around digital peer support. And some of the new analytical techniques, like how you look at the data, and also some of the actual technologies may not be aligned with the values and principles of peer support specialists. And so having a really strong understanding of what technology you're using, what people are doing with the data, is really important, especially if you're also offering peer support services, that you want to let the people you're serving know this as well. And for individuals who may have lower rates of technology adoption, so they may not be as familiar with some of the technology, we know within the scientific literature that individuals that are not as familiar have more skepticism around some of the technology and what people do with the data. And the last one there is compliance and privacy and confidentiality. And so we know that the world of digital peer support is changing literally every day. And so understanding what is the latest in compliancy related to HIPAA to make sure people are offering digital peer support services in a way that is promotes the privacy and confidentiality of not only the peer support specialist, but also the service user. If you don't mind going to the next page, just speak briefly to the digital peer support certification. This was co-produced with peer support specialists and peer and non-peer academic scientists. This is really great, and some of the research that has been completed on this by our team, we've seen that peer support specialists were able to increase their ability or capacity to offer digital peer support services throughout this 3-month certification. And so really, really exciting work that's being done. And what's interesting is that other fields of study like psychology, social work, psychiatry, they've had years and years of training on telemental health or telehealth. And peer support specialist, this in March of 2020 was the first time ever that digital peer support became something that was used rapidly all over the world. And there was no formal or informal training in more advanced types of technologies beyond, warm lines. And so really exciting to see this happen and to really formalize, how to offer these services. So briefly, if you go to the next slide, I'll just speak to supervision. And so this is, if there's any supervisors out there offering support services or supervisory services to digital peer support specialists, some of the things that are really important as a supervisor's checklist is understanding the policies of the organization, in that what if we're using Facebook to offer peer support services? Is that okay? Is that aligned with HIPAA standards? Also understand the technology needs of the staff that you're working with. Do people need data access? Do people internet access? Do people need phones? Do they need tablets? Also understanding individuals' work schedules and maintaining those, because it's really easy to connect with people at 10 o'clock at night when you have an idea, but maintaining those work schedules and role modeling that to individuals, and so they know to only work during the times that they are actually working. Have a communication and accountability plan, which is really important. A lot of people, what was happening for digital peer support specialists and supervisors, they were receiving text messages, and then hours later a telephone call, and then people are getting 30 emails in 1 hour, so people were connecting in different ways and leading to supervisors potentially having a technology overload because they're getting all this reaching out from individuals. And so making sure you have a communication and accountability plan, one of which one of my colleagues who's a peer support specialist who I was just speaking with today, their communication and accountability plan is using Slack. And so it's a group chat that people can check in with at any time. And that means that the supervisor is able to connect with individuals in an asynchronous way, meaning it's not time dependent. And then they're also not being inundated by telephone calls, emails, and texts. And so one of the great things about that. And of course, model confidence. Maybe it's their first time using some of these technology features. And so modeling confidence is a great way to encourage people to use technologies. And then also understand the safety needs or safety huddles when necessary. When we've developed digital technologies, we need to make sure that we have, or we're using them, we need to make sure that we have crisis plans in place, maybe not crisis plans, but at least warm lines or support services in place, just in case someone gets an email or a text message that someone isn't feeling well and staff need to respond. And so just encouraging people to have these plans in place. And if I may have 5 more minutes, that's okay. You just cut me off if this is not. You can go to the next slide, please. So what factors impact digital peer support technology selection? And so this is among digital peer support specialists themselves. So one of which is having access to the technology, also the accessibility features. If you're working with people that maybe older adults, maybe have some challenges seeing the technology or visual impairments, making sure that some of the technologies have accessibility features, which you can literally turn on a smartphone, which is great. You can go into settings and turn on the accessibility features, or you can access some of these things on a tablet, so it's actually larger for individuals. Of course, having trainings as well. So having training in how to use virtual reality, is a great way, or even trainings in using video games to offer peer support services. And there's some literature coming out of the Veterans Administration offering video games for peer support. It's really exciting work and very new. Next is preference, multimodal pathways for connection. And so if you're connecting with individuals who maybe maybe don't want to use a video game, or they don't even want to connect by telephone. Multimodal just meaning having lots of different pathways that people can connect with you. So maybe it's through text, maybe it's through video conferencing, maybe it's through the telephone. We can never forget it's about connecting with individuals, not the actual technology. But if you offer many different ways, then you're offering other people opportunities to align with their preferences. We're seeing that anecdotally that younger adults are preferring text messages. And in one of our data sets that we looked at, we saw the only difference is that within age is that older adults are preferring to use video conferencing and younger adults are not. And so that's the only difference we've seen in technology use, including smartphone apps, virtual reality, video games, and telephonic peer support. And of course, make sure these technologies align with your values and ethics. And so having a keen understanding of what the technology is doing, where your data, what's going on with your data, knowing that if someone says they're not feeling well in the technology, what is the plan that will happen on the technology if someone reports that. And then of course, cost and sustainability as well. And so what we're hearing and what we're seeing at the policy level within the United States, many states are advocating to keep digital peer support around after the COVID-19 crisis and have an option to offer in-person and digital peer support services. And I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask us to go to the next slide, and then I will stop there. So I just want to speak to the digital disadvantage as well. And so this is a slide of Pokemon Go. I don't know if anyone remembers this app that people could download. And this was an app where you hold up your phone if you have a smartphone, and you walk and collect Pokemon, and it's using like augmented reality to do that. And so this is a picture on Twitter with the hashtag #MyPokehood. Because there was actually in this place, in other urban places around the United States, there were no Pokemon. And so this is Chicago. And so everyone within the scientific community was like, oh, this would be a great health promotion activity. People can get out there and walk. This is great. But what about people in the south side of Chicago or other places like Detroit or other urban areas? And so we need to be really aware of the digital disadvantage. And so what this means is that when people create technologies, they incorporate something called user-centered design. And within that, they talk to people and ask them, do you like this? And tell us improvements that you want to make. And so what happened with My Pokemon Go is that they used algorithms from a very wealthy area that was predominantly Caucasian, and that's where they placed the Pokemon. And so that's why we don't see this on the south side of Chicago. And so when you're looking at technologies, it's not going to be written in their privacy statements that they're promoting health equity, and they've included algorithms that incorporate all people of different age, race, everything like that. And so a lot of that is understanding how the technology was developed. Was it co-produced with peer support specialists? Was it produced by peer support specialists themselves? And that's one way understanding that the technology is equitable. And so in the interest of time, we can go to my thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, Daryl McGraw and Karen Fortuna, thank you both for your presentations. A lot of really interesting information shared today. And we have quite a few questions from the audience. We will try to cover as many of them as we can today before the end of our time. So I will start out with, we have quite a few questions around, specific questions around training. But let me just kick off let's start with a question for Daryl around engagement and engaging people. So one of the audience members wanted to know, Daryl, do you have guidelines or protocols around initial engagement for peers who are working at Intercept Zero?
Well, it's always, I appreciate the question. So the initial, the guideline is always safety first. So it's always going to be safety first, knowing your environment, meeting people in public. And so in each agency would have their own, difference. Like you want to make sure that, like, especially for the first engagement, usually is in a public place, Dunkin' Donuts or a donut place, some place that's open and always making sure you're, the individual is safe. So I would say that the agency that engage with people, especially if you're engaging in person, those are the, you want to make sure that safety first is always safety first.
Thank you for that. Daryl, this second question, I think I'm going to send to you first. So we have quite a few questions from the audience about lived experience and becoming trained as a peer. And so I'm going to try to combine some of these into one, just in the interest of time. Cool. So a couple of people are asking, does somebody have to have lived experience of incarceration in order to be a forensic peer or to be able to be eligible for the training? And then part two of that is in regards to recovery. Somebody wants to know, can they become trained as a peer recovery specialist while they are undergoing MAT?
So the answer the first one, what we recommend is that, and when I do trainings, I normally I've trained one or two people, like very few, who don't have the, recovery coach or recovery specialist training. That's kind of one of the criteria. That way they already are familiar with the peer model. They understand what peer support is, or recovery coaching is, and then the forensic piece just enhances their skill set and is another tool to be used in the toolbox. So we prefer people to already be trained in recovery coaching or a peer support model, whatever their state had, like whatever certification they have. In reference to that, I have trained one or two people, special circumstances. Their family members were involved in the criminal justice system and so on and so forth. So, I mean, that was a case-by-case basis, but it's a lot. It makes more sense to train people who are already trained in peer support of some sort or recovery coaching. And the other part with the lived experience from addiction, with the MAT piece, we have to as people in recovery, we can't discriminate, especially, we don't discriminate. Individuals would have to know where they are in their recovery path, because I think that those individuals who use who are on MAT can be very resourceful for individuals that may also be entering that part of their recovery journey. But it also depends on where the individual is at. So I will say yes, that person absolutely could be. I have friends that are on MAT and that are forensic peer support staff members, but they're also solid in their recovery journey. And I believe that individual knows what I mean when they say solid in the recovery journey.
Thank you for that. So
Sure.
the next question is around video games and social media. So I'm going to direct this one to Karen. Somebody wants to know, their question is around privacy, things like HIPAA and 42 CFR. Any tips for navigating those privacy issues when looking into how to employ video games or other social media platforms in general, in the context of HIPAA, 42 CFR, and other privacy concerns? What are people finding these days?
Sure, that's a great question. And so what is happening at the policy level is that we're seeing new technologies being developed that could be used within organizations that are aligned with HIPAA. And so with that, I would recommend one of which is staying tuned, because these will likely in the future be something that is reimbursable and developed with HIPAA compliance in mind. And so also within that is that a lot of peer-run organizations are doing that, and they are using fake email addresses and names when people register. So within that, individuals' names aren't actually offered within the video gaming platforms. And for social media, I have not seen anything around the privacy and confidentiality. And I do expect in the very near future that there will be some apps that are developed out there, or even websites where these support services can be offered on a HIPAA compliant type of platform. And within social media too, or video games, you can, if you're offering these services, amazing. You also can encourage people to engage in these types of services outside of the peer support services that you're offering. And so working with, friends, setting up social support groups for individuals to, use video games, maybe at your organization, to connect with other individuals. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So the next question is also around technology and the use of algorithms. So someone when you had asked people to write into the chat about their experience with using technology. So one audience member says that they're using an algorithm to detect and flag language that might indicate someone is at risk for suicide, and that flags somebody to one of the peer moderators to do outreach. And could you comment on that, like maybe other uses of algorithms that that you're seeing are being used in similar ways?
Oh yeah, that is really great and amazing. And there's some work being done now around algorithms where they're predicting suicidality thoughts or behaviors using these algorithms. And so what that sounds like to me is natural language processing, in that people are looking at text message and the actual text that people are sending folks, and they'll see a word that is maybe representative of potentially not feeling well. And that sounds like it's flagging the system. Some other applications that are out there as well include understanding distress through these text messages or even email, and even in some work audio as well. So through an application like a video conferencing. There's some early work in older adults who are experiencing loneliness in this area. And so what's interesting about all of this is that making sure that things are aligned with the values and principles of the individuals that you are serving. And so, so we want to make sure that people know what will happen if they say something over chat or video. What will happen? Will a police officer show up at someone's door? And so that's really about informed consent. And there are some social media platforms that are out there that have this type of response. And so just being aware of these things within technology, if you're using them in the work you're doing, or if you're recommending them to other folks, just making sure that people are aware of that and what are the possibilities of, if you type this, what are the potential possibilities in that? And I'm hearing a lot of great things about the suicidality app, so it's great that folks are sharing that.
That's great, thank you. So the next question, I think I'm going to direct to both Daryl and Karen, if you'd both like to comment. So we have a couple of questions about just funding technology, and this, of course, is a question that comes up a lot. So any strategies that you have used or that you would recommend people think about when they're thinking about ways to, potentially fund access to technologies for their peers?
Hey, Daryl, you can go ahead, and I have a few, you first, and I can talk about some options if you want.
Sure. Could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry. I thought, Karen, you were going to field that one. Can you repeat it really quickly?
Sure. So this is, oh, go ahead. I'll repeat the question, and then maybe Karen, you can go first. So the question was around funding technology. So what are some strategies that organizations can think about when wanting to implement some of these technologies for their peers, and what can they think about ways for providing this, like from the funding perspective?
Oh,
sure. So
I could just really
go
ahead, Karen. No, I was just going to say that, one of the ones, hello, can you guys hear me? I was just going to say one of the ones that we didn't talk too much about that we've had a little success with is warm lines and hotlines and connecting individuals with hotlines and warm lines like that. There's been some funding where people were willing, or organizations, private organizations, have been willing to set that up if we could show that how important the need is. And when we talk about individuals, that are justice involved, Intercept Zero, individuals may need to have that person to contact. So that's some of the things that, that we've seen funded. And then there's other crisis service interventions that I've seen with law enforcement. But I more so I don't really talk as much about those, but they do exist.
Cool. And some of the things that we encourage people to look into in our trainings is one of which is the State Assistive Technology Act, which is amazing. So everyone here joining us from many different states across the country can literally type in State Assistive Technology Act and your state, and it'll bring you will eventually bring you to a link where you can access free or low-cost technology for individuals. And you can get loaner devices. You can purchase incredibly inexpensive devices that have been refurbished, so they've been potentially fixed. They've been used before and fixed. And then you can also, they could do demos of devices as well, which is really great and exciting. And then there's also Medicaid offers SafeLink services and also Assurance on the West Coast, which are free smartphones or cell phones for individuals who qualify for Medicaid reimbursable services. This also comes with a data plan called Lifeline. You can go on a website and just add that in there, and you can actually process that for yourself or some colleagues or people you're working with, really over the internet, which is really great and exciting. And these are some amazing resources. And within the United States, you can also dial 211, which brings you to your local United Way. ask for technology support services. Know that people are also calling 211 right now for COVID vaccinations and information. So that list, the waiting list could be longer than before. You can also get help for food, housing, for individuals, job support. And then there's just two more that are religious organizations. So if you do access technology through that, you want to make sure that you share that with the information that you're offering this to people, one of which is St. Vincent de Paul and also the Salvation Army. And so just some places to check in on to get people access to technology. And I'm happy to follow up further because there's also grants out there as well that take a little bit more time but offer more access to these types of technology services.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome, Karen. I actually, it made me think about, it triggered something that I know that a local foundation actually gave us money to help with backpacks and also providing cell phones because they knew that individuals would need to stay connected to doctors and try to find, employers and keeping appointments, and those that didn't have cell phones, and the only qualification was they had to be justice involved. And so we were able to get a bunch of cell phones on the street that would actually provide minutes and everything like that. We were able to do that at a pretty large, for quite a few people actually, through a donation from a grant. Through a donation from a foundation.
Yeah, and I'd like to add, that's great and amazing. I'd like to add too, we were working with states and they wanted to offer a more expensive technology platform to individuals. And yeah, that would be great. But in order to do that, it would have taken, 6 months to a year to apply for a grant, get the grant, to get this really neat technology platform. And so I just want to remind folks that the technology is just about facilitating the human relationship between two people. So we can never forget the value of the telephone, especially now when people are living potentially in isolation. So just wanted to add that. I love that there's this other program as well.
Right, that's pretty cool.
Thank you for that. Thank you both. And I just want to remind everyone in the audience, we will be following up in a mailing from the Gaines listserv with the slides, and there's information in the slides of where to contact both of the speakers today, because I know I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat that people may have some follow-up questions for you both. So the next question is just, are you using motivational interview training? So I'll start with Daryl on that. And I guess my follow-up question to that is, if you are, how is that being impacted or not during COVID? And are you using technology to support those trainings?
We don't forensic peer support, and it's agency based. If the agency, I'll say if the agency's using it, but me and my forensic peer support staff, it's about the mutual human relationship. So we're not using motivational interviewing. Maybe some at a very minimal level, but we really just try to engage people as humans and not try to use like different. We haven't had the need to do that. We just really, the training is to really engage people and meet them where they're at, and then building up. The most important thing is building up the trust, right? And building up that trust factor to support people as the best way that we can. So we don't use motivational interviewing. It was used in the past, like in case management settings, but we're not case managers. We're peer support staff, so we're supporting those individuals in the community just through mutuality,
Yeah, I love that, and that's really the difference with digital peer support and more clinical types of peer support services. What we're seeing in the scientific community is that technology is increasing an individual's ability to offer an evidence-based practice that could be related to a clinical environment. So for example, not to say that, our team is doing this or that, this is controversial, so just so folks know that we can actually use technology now. And have it so a peer support specialist could offer potentially cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's because the technology offers a platform to deliver cognitive behavioral therapy as the way it's supposed to be delivered. And so, you know, within the values and principles of peer support specialists, just as Gerald was saying, that is not aligned. And so we're seeing that happening more and more within the scientific community in some early studies. We don't know, because there's no science on this, I can give my own opinion on this, but if that's something that would be acceptable to a large population of peer support specialists. And so, you know, again, it's why it's important to consider how some of the technology was developed to assure it's aligned with your values and practices.
Right, and the values are very important, and I think that, you know, I think it's great that, you know, people with lived experience get all different types of jobs so they can, and getting paid livable wages. But once we start adding clinical treatments, we need to change the role because it can be confusing, right? And peers, there's a standard. And I think that, so, I mean, not saying that they shouldn't do that job, it's just that the role should be different, you know? It would be something different. So that's my opinion. That's my opinion. I think that, you know, case managers should be called case managers, right? And peer support, man, it's about mutuality. And this is the struggle. This is the struggle that we see, you know, using that lived experience. You know, I always say that lived experience is one of the best evidence-based practices there is, right? And I think that there's a struggle with, you know, trying to implement clinical things because it's beneficial for the funder, and that's the way people get paid. So all these different things start to get put in on the peer, which is unfair because that was not what the role was originally made for. But things change, so I say the title should change. You shouldn't be considered a peer specialist if you're doing case management work, and that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you, and I think it's going to lead to some later contention. And if people will engage in using some of these technologies. So yeah, and so anyways, it's really important to consider how the technology is developed and know that this is, you know, here's the components of it before you choose to engage with it or not.
And with that, I'm going to say we're at the close of our presentation. I wanted to thank once again Daryl McGraw and Karen Fortuna for both of you for sharing your expertise today. I'm just going to wrap up with walking people through a couple of final items for those of you who would like to download the attendance certificate. And again, this is not for continuing education credits. It's just for personal portfolio use. You should have seen a file transfer box pop up just in the last minute or so. If you click the file, it should turn a dark blue, and then a download button will appear in a darker gray. Just go ahead and hit the download button, and that should initiate the process to download the certificate directly to your computer. And you will also see one last poll for the day. If you would like to provide any input on additional TA or other areas where you would like related information, please go ahead and indicate that, and we will be sharing that information with SAMHSA. So the next two webinars that are hosted by SAMHSA's Gain Center are listed here. On March 24th, we have a webinar on innovations to support drug treatment court programs during COVID-19 with a focus on technology. And we also have an early diversion virtual learning community on the kickoff webinar. This is the kickoff webinar on strategies for addressing treatment engagement challenges. And registration information will be shared via the Gains listserv. And here is the address for subscribing to the Gains listserv. And so if you'd like to receive today's slides, as well as other future announcements about activities at the Gain Center, please go ahead and use this address to sign up. And I'd like to thank everyone for their participation today. And if you have any other questions or comments for us, feel free to contact either SAMHSA directly or SAMHSA's Gain Center at any of the details listed here, and we hope to see you all next time at our next event. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.